Hey everyone, I am excited to talk to you all about developer superfans. Even though the title of my talk says developers, it really is agnostic to kind of all community members. So there's something good in here for everybody. I am single screening it, so I will tell you right now, it is going to be really interesting to like present on a single screen and not have like the chat next to me because I don't know about you folks, anyone who does presenting, like presenting in 2020 and virtual is like a way different ballgame than presenting in person. Presenting in person, you can like see people and their reactions and what they're thinking and how they're feeling through those actions, right? And it's a lot easier to do. So the first thing we're going to do is, I know we're coming after the pet show. It's probably going to be a little bit of a quiet time slot, but I would love to get as interactive as possible. So if you want to head over to slido.com, slido.com, and use the hashtag community led. I will continue this Slido for a couple of weeks. I'll leave the date out pretty far. So if folks want to keep coming in here and voting, I think it would still be fun to see this in the recording. So please feel free to get as involved as you'd like to as a recording watcher also. So this first question we're going to dive into here in a little bit, but it's what tactics have you tried to build relationships? Before we dive into this question too deeply, I'm actually going to do a little bit of an introduction here and kind of dive into my content. So I love building presentations. I think they're beautiful. I like spending a lot of time on them. But for me, I spend too much time on them and I wanted to actually like focus on the content. And I actually have a lot of fun videos I want to share. So this is going to exist in a blog post form, which I'm actually going to share with a bunch of folks that you can watch me do because I'm sharing my whole screen for some awesome links in here. And hopefully you don't just see a bunch of repeat faces, which I think you do. And that didn't work. Hold up. One memento here. There we go. Cool. If you want to grab the slides, feel free to do so. I'll get you out of this trippy sharing window. Yay! People are typing and responding. So into the content at hand, developer superfans. Building trust with developers is actually incredibly difficult, and we'll kind of dive into that in just a little bit. And I think anyone who has had to work with them can validate and verify that. There's a reason why there's a whole industry that is very community-led and community-focused as it pertains to developers, because they are just such an interesting audience with just a really interesting way to think about life. My entire presentation is actually going to be very focused on a fictional character whose name is Ted Lasso. Again, I'm not going to look in the chat because I don't want to make everyone look through the window of screenshots, but I would love to know who has seen Ted Lasso. You guys, I have more than one device. Why don't I just pick up my other device? Who has seen Ted Lasso? Like, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'll look at it later and be very excited to know. But it is one of my absolute favorite shows to date. First favorite being Friends. But anyways, Ted Lasso is this really great story about a coach who is hired to actually coach a more of a major league type of a team over in Europe, and he's coming from the US and he's just out of his element completely. And his manager, her name is Rebecca, and Rebecca didn't exactly hire him for the best of intentions. And so it's very clear in a lot of, especially the early part of the show, that Ted isn't someone that she even wants around. But what Ted does is he brings Rebecca biscuits every single day. You can see actually the little cute pink box here on this video, because I'm going to try this right now and see if it works. Okay, so I know folks can't hear the audio anyways, so I threw the video chat. Sorry, I was not prepared for screen sharing and window swapping in this capacity. Poor part on my side, but I threw the video in the chat. Basically, what happens is the kids are talking to the dad, and the dad is like, they're talking about how they do not like Rebecca, who is the blonde woman sitting there, because she's not the very, very nice person. Ted walks up, Ted Lasso, he's the idol in this scene here, runs into the thing, super Ted-like thing to do, comes in here, starts chatting with Rebecca. And Rebecca essentially and him are talking about the fact that they kind of bonded recently. She's still very short on the concept of them bonding. He says that he's going through marital problems. They started leveraging the term Rebecca to actually use that, or sorry, not the term Rebecca, the term Oklahoma, to use it as a point that they should tell the other person the truth. And the absolute funniest part inside of this video is at the end where Ted, he goes, "Have you enjoyed getting to know me?" And she says, I think she says like, very much, or whatever his response is. And then he's like, "Oklahoma?" And she's like, "No, not at all." I think that we all can relate to that. And I'm sorry the video didn't give as much like oomph to what I was trying to explain there since it didn't work. But I think with that point and what a lot of us can relate to is that it's really, really, really hard sometimes to break people out of their shells. And a lot of times as community, leaders, that's our job to do, right? Is to break people out of their shells and to actually provide that comfort and that ability to have that conversation and to have that become a two-way street. And so it's really interesting because when you're working with developers, it's always like you're working with a Rebecca. There's always a barrier. There's a wall. They're trying to keep you away from what's happening, what they're focused on, or whatever it is that they want. They just don't want people to be around them, right? And so it's a very difficult thing to dive into. So what Ted essentially is doing with Rebecca is he's starting a cadence. Every single morning, he is bringing her these biscuits, which you probably saw on the desk in like a cute little pink box, which I'll share a better with you video with you at the end of my session here that really shows the biscuit story. But Ted eventually brings her biscuits every single day, and he does this to slowly and eventually actually build a relationship with her. And as much as that's a lot of work and that can be really hard to do, that's exactly what you have to do with developers is you have to put in the biscuit work. Like you have to bring them something or deliver something or provide them that energy and time to actually find that level of success. Sorry, I realized I could have been open on this window instead, so we could have been absorbing these tactics. This is actually what we're diving into. So Ted tried to bring Rebecca biscuits and continues to bring her biscuits. For anyone who's seen the show, I'm sure you're kind of chuckling a little bit. But there are other ways to build relationships, right? And so that's why I wanted to bring from the audience, like how are other ways that you've started building relationships with folks? One-to-one conversations, that's what I'm going to heavily dive into here in a couple minutes. Allowing for humans to find themselves. Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. We're actually going to dive into that a little bit here. Also, sorry if you hear my puppy barking, kind of tailing from the talent show. No, not really, but she just likes to be very vocal. Being genuine and showing real interest. Yes. Personal messages. Ooh, coffee immersions. I like that idea. Being candid and vulnerable. Cool. I think that a lot, and this is why I say that developers can fall into these same similar buckets, because a lot of that same stuff is exactly what you have to do when you're working with developers as well. So this is the audience engagement that we started off with here. So we're going to dive into this next step. So I have a model, and I call this model the building trust model. I've talked about this a bit before. If you've been on the community club, you might have heard this. At the end of the day, it's really just 3 simple steps. In my head, I say them out loud like they're simple, but in my head, they're complex. They're trying to break down, how do I figure out this person? What do I do next? How do I communicate best? And so that's what I want to talk about today is like breaking all of that down and getting past that barrier that folks might have in front of them, whether they be developers or whether they be general community members. There's always that barrier. So step 1 is do the research. In Ted's case, he's bringing Rebecca biscuits every single morning so that he can do his research. Don't get me wrong, Rebecca probably values those biscuits and can actually be a likely contender for step 2, which we'll get to in a second. But the thing that he's really doing is he's doing his research, because what he's trying to do is he knows that in order to get through and crack a shell like Rebecca, he actually has to get to know her and he has to start to build that relationship. And so in the case of developers, you don't have that opportunity to bring them biscuits every day. Sure, maybe you could send them a nice tweet that they would enjoy, or send them some type of like good morning message. But I think we both know if we did that on that level of a cadence, they'd probably run away further away from us than they would want to join us. Ted's in a case where he gets to work with Rebecca every day. So if we're thinking about this from a Ted and Rebecca situation, what is a normal amount of contact or engagement or reaching out to someone who is a target, either community member for you. Maybe there's someone you want to get to speak at your conference. Maybe it's just one of your really, really power users. And for whatever reason, you just can't crack their shell to try to have a conversation with them. And so doing your research, diving into who they are and what they care about is the absolute first step in my mind to starting an engagement with someone that you've never spoke with before. And so here's a few bullets of how I like to think about that. And I, again, am thinking about this definitely from a developer standpoint. Where did they work at? What are they building? What projects do they care about? What do you think that they're motivated by? I am huge in the case of driving by motivation. And I think that all community members and managers can relate to that, right? There's a reason that folks are there. And especially with developers, when you can tap into why they're there or what they're motivated by, that can actually open up a lot of insights into how you can help those folks. Do you have commonalities that you can showcase? I think that earlier in the sessions, when I was actually able to watch a few sessions, there's a lot of chatter about dogs and dogs versus cats, and Holly Firestone and I kind of laughing back and forth about dogs over cats. But that commonality is exactly like what you're going to be able to bring into that. And I think if anything, we've almost seen that firsthand through the pet show, through the chat, through some of the other things, like when Danielle introduced her presentation and she asked people to like replace that name tag that we're not wearing by some of the things that you love doing. I saw a lot of chatter with folks going back and forth, and we all know that stuff works, but bringing all that stuff together and making sure that you're delivering that research and that they know that you put the time in to actually get to know them is going to be a really key thing for developers specifically. And so right here in this call out, I've actually got like what a fake message could be that I would send to myself, because there's a few different things that I like to think about and break down. So addressing it to myself, hey, Tessa, I saw your tweet about your first 90 days as head of developer relations. What an interesting read. So right off the bat, we introduced, or we said someone's name, right? We called them by name, and don't screw that up. You know how many times people call me Teresa? I have no idea why, not even close to Teresa, but it happens all the time. And what it only does for me is it proves to me that they are not paying attention and they don't actually care about who I truly am. I saw your tweet about the first 90 days, right? That means that they have expressed and shown that they're doing their research. They found our content. They've done something that has actually proved that they know who we are. What an interesting read. They complimented, right? So having a compliment as a part of that introduction can just like make that first introduction feel just a little bit kinder and just a little bit stronger to build that level of trust. I really liked how you outlined bullet points for folks to be able to compare a developer advocate to a developer relations leader. Not only did they actually prove that they've done the research, they complemented that. They also, made a note about what they actually thought was valuable or the part that they liked about it. If you're working with developers or anyone, diving into what they're building, like, I love that you thought about this feature this way, or I see that you contributed with another developer that way, or I see that you got engaged with this person in that forum post in this fashion. Having actual tangible examples is really helpful. Thank you for shedding light on this topic. Then we hit the emotions. I also noticed you love dogs. Here's a pic of my furry friend, Lucy. Between you folks and me, my dog's name is Lucy, so this message wouldn't even make sense to send to me. Although if it was sent to me, I would get very excited because they have a pet named Lucy also. So see what I kind of did there? I set that first message and that first conversation around how do you break that barrier? How do you break that ice? How do you get through to them to start to have that conversation? Now, don't get me wrong, this message would not have worked on Rebecca. Wait till you see the video at the end. She's a hard nut. But at least this is one step closer to that. And at least you're putting that time and effort in, you're complimenting them, you're recognizing something that they've worked on, you're adding a little personal flair. The end result is that you want to share something so compelling that they insist on responding back to you. So let's dive into the next Slido example. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to make you look at the chat of Bisque for like a hot second, just so that folks can grab the blog post. Cool. So coming back to this, what tactics, let's try the next question instead. Folks, I'm never going to present again with only one screen. This is like throwing off my entire speaking game. Okay, new question. What are topics that you like to include in your first outreach to a community member? So things that I mentioned were like their projects and what they're working on. In the case of writing a message to myself, I mentioned my tweet. I don't write a lot of code for being a very developer focused person. I do some, but not as much as I used to. Complimenting their work is something I like to include in a topic. Like maybe there's a pet side to it. Maybe there's some other angle to that actual content of like what you like to bring into that. It might be product based, right? Like what does your product leverage, or something related to that. But there's lots of different things. I think we all try to how to do a good presentation. Oh, that's great. Not this way, not with like one single screen. I'll tell you what, that's not the way to do it. Shows interest in them. Yes, exactly, exactly. So I mentioned this at the end of my blog post because this is something like that I can newly claim, and I'm very excited about it. But I've watched Star Wars for the first time last week. And so I'm pretty sure that I'm going to use that for like the next year and be like, I watched Star Wars for the first time at the age of 36. But hey, I'm here now. Ooh, highlighting their work, what excites them. Yes, how did you get to the community? That one's great too. I think so highlighting their work and like what excites them, that like taps into something, right? So like I probably shared something just now. I'm not sure how many participants are actually watching these sessions live per se, but I probably said something with the Star Wars thing that was like, what? Someone just watched Star Wars for the first time? Those things, like that emotion, that like light that you just lit, like that is what really gets people to want to engage and want to respond because they just can't help but respond to that thing or that activity that you're talking about. All right, I'm talking a lot, so let's dive into the next one because we only have 10 more minutes left and I want to make sure you get time for questions. Okay, step number 2. This step is super easy, and the more creative that you can be, the better. So step number 2 is while you're doing your research, you've likely learned tons about this person. I shared some stuff about me earlier on that you kind of could allude to right in the message that I sent to myself, I suppose. I love dogs, just watched Star Wars for the first time. Used to be a developer, don't write a lot of code now. I'm also sharing how candid and goofy I am by being very open about the fact that I'm not loving this one screen presentation mode. But all of these things are things that I'm sharing with you. And out of that, you're able to pull tiny little details, right? So you could respond to me and start talking about Star Wars and be like, who's your favorite character? What was your favorite scene? What did you enjoy the most? And then turn around and leverage that later. So here's where you leverage that to provide a value. Oftentimes, as community builders, we have these like opportune abilities to provide value to folks that they think are huge that we see as very small. Network introductions, right? Super easy to connect two people, but if those two people really need to be connected, both of them, for the existence of their relationship, will remember how they got there and how their relationship was established. Product recommendations. If you tell someone about a product that nails their problem, boom, I'm sold for life on you and I'm sold for life on that product. Sharing content, investing in their work, doing tips or tricks, right? So someone might be like, hey, Tessa, did you know you could only share Chrome when you're doing screen sharing? Or something related to that when I'm trying to make up for some technical mistake that I may have made. There's a lot of opportunities and ways that you can provide values. And this is honestly just a list. When you're thinking and having that conversation, you want to get that first message out there. You want to get them to engage in an ideal world. If you can't get them to engage, provide a value anyways, respond back, add additional context, prove that you know them even further, and then provide a value right then and there. Say, hey, maybe they have been looking for public speaking opportunities because you stalked their Twitter and figured that out. Leveraging that and saying, I know of 3 or 4 different conference organizers right now. They're looking for topics in these areas. I feel like you might be a good fit. I'm happy to do an introduction. Boom, before you know it, hook, line, and sinker, you've said something that actually taps into something that they need and want to do. And so that's why that first step of research is so important. And the second step can be easy, straightforward, nothing, almost just common sense to us community folks, to just provide that value to them so that they feel that trust growing. All right. So Ted didn't give up on Rebecca, right? Rebecca was very cold to him. She was very standoffish. In the video I'm going to share at the end, like I'm going to have to share it, and you might just have to watch it from Twitter or watch it from the stage before the next session or after, because we're running out of time. But it is absolutely great, and I hope that what comes out of it is that you watch Ted Lasso, because it's a great show. But Ted doesn't give up on Rebecca. She is cold to him. She's awful to him, and he keeps trying. He keeps pushing forward. And sometimes being a developer community manager and focusing on developers, or even just really difficult community members, can feel a lot like that. And so following these steps can really, really help with moving forward in that fashion. I'm going to start the next question, but I'm actually going to keep going because I want us to be able to get to a Q&A. And also the Q&A is in the Hopin platform, and I will be happy to answer those questions. If I don't get to it in my allotted time slot, I'll actually tweet all of my responses out. So I will do my best to include folks that I think I can tag. Otherwise, definitely follow me on Twitter, which I'll share here in a bit. So the third step, very final step, it's quite easy, actually. It's the whole reason that you wanted to talk to that person to begin with. We're going to finally do it. So the reason that we want to talk to that person could have been maybe they're a key community member, or maybe I shouldn't say community member because that'd be easier to reach. They're a key user. They're a power user of your product, but for whatever reason, they've chose not to join your community. They've chose not to join your chat platforms. They've chose not to join really kind of whatever you have in place for them to be able to engage in. And you're just dying to talk to this person. You really want to know what they're up to, and if there's any way you can get them into these communities, because you see them out there in Stack Overflow, or maybe in Reddit or Twitter or these other places where they're answering and they're helping, they're engaging with your product and your users, just not in the platforms that you're in. And so you're ready to make that ask. You're ready to say, hey, we could really use your effort or your attendance in this community. Or maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe you're looking for them to moderate that community. If it is bigger than that, the first tip that I will have with this three-step model is that you start really small. So if you're ready at step 3, so you've started that conversation, you've put in the research, you've got to know that person, you've made that clear, you've provided that value, they have seen that value, they've engaged with you again, I still recommend that you start something very small and build your way up to, would you like to be a moderator in our community? Because there's a lot of trust building and a lot that can go into place to begin with. And so making that ask at just the right time, using that right judgment, and using all the information that you've learned thus far, and your gut, use your gut. Do they feel like they are ready to engage with me? Do they feel like they're ready to be asked to become a moderator, or are they ready to maybe just be asked to join the community? Definitely start with those smaller steps and build up to that bigger step. And that's community management in a whole, right? Is just building those strong relationships. But when you're making your ask, a few things I want to point out, and when you're engaging with developers in general, a lot like some difficult community members might be, is that you have to make the job easy for them to commit to. So make your ask as simple as possible the first time. You want to build that relationship over time, and you want to start small. Make it as easy as possible on them, right? So if you're like, hey, can you book time with me? I love Calendly. I love some of those other tools, but make sure that it is a platform and leveraged in a way that folks can easily book with you. I'm a huge fan of SavvyCal for this reason. I switched because if you look at Calendly to SavvyCal, SavvyCal actually allows folks to put their calendar underneath so they can choose a time slot that's available for them. If folks are using Calendly, you can use it, but it's more difficult. So things like that, right? Just thinking about that tiny, tiny little bit of detail that's going to pull some of that difficulty out of that problem and allow them to be able to work with you and engage with you a lot more easily. Be prepared and ready. Don't make them wait on you. I kind of just alluded to that, but always make it about them. Find a way to make your demanding requests still about them. I have had situations like public speaking, for example. I had a lot of advocates in a previous program that I built want to go to conferences. They wanted to fly across the country to actually go there and to talk to other developers and to present on our behalf. And so I made sure that they enjoyed that benefit, right? I covered their travel. I gave them a stipend for Lyft. I gave them a stipend for food. In some cases, actually, I would send them little gift cards to cute little stores or restaurants or things that I thought that they would like in the area, because they're an advocate, right? They have turned into this level where your work is going to pay off. And that's where I'm getting into. When you put in this time, you build those steps, you do your research, they're going to naturally turn into an army of advocates for you when you start to bring them together. And you can do this with your community members in general. You can do this with your users. Really, you can do this with anyone. Building that trust, building that relationship, being there for them. Eventually, you already start to see all of these different steps. And I know in community management, we see it all the time. They get to this point where they're ready to advocate for us. They're ready to either help within the community, they're ready to help outside of that. And when you can actually get developers to do that, first off, it's a lot harder to get them to this point. But when you can get them to this point, they will do all of these bullet points and so much more, because when they finally have that full level of trust for a product, a team, a company, a person, a brand, they're ready to like scream it from the rooftops. And so as much as this content is very agnostic to really any communities, it's very specific to developers, because these are the necessary steps to build the strongest relationships with developers that are going to lead to a lot of this stuff. Like, think about if you actually had folks out there voluntarily doing G2 crowd reviews for you or Trustpilot, right? Those are hard, very hard to actually get commitment to. And so, yeah, I think it's just a lot of things that they can commit to and be able to help with. So what I want to do, and this is so not even going to be even close to the same, but what I really want to do is share this in the last few minutes that I might have some space to please watch this video. Ted did these steps. He did the research, he did the value, he did the time to build this relationship with Rebecca. And you'll get to see a lot of the results of all of that work in that video, plus a lot of really good laughs. So I am going to try again after I stop screen sharing. Let's stop sharing here. I am going to go in, now I'm not sharing anymore, so I can just ruthlessly look through the chat. I'm going to go in, share my Twitter, share this blog post again, and all of the links applicable. Sorry, I am at time. I will answer all Q&A questions over on Twitter and probably continue the conversation slightly. I didn't talk fast enough, apparently, or had more content. Normally, it's the other way around for me. Thank you, everyone. It has been great getting to know you. I'll throw all the data in the chat soon.